Hello and welcome to today's webinar. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and made available to you. My name is Hannah Samaru, Marketing Coordinator at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I will be your moderator today. Our session will focus on what it means to cross the chasm and understand the three early phases of DITA adoption: exploration, preparation, and education. This morning, we are very excited to have Dr. Joanne Hackos of Comtech Services with us. Joanne is the President of Comtech Services, a content management and information design firm based in Denver, Colorado, which she founded in 1978. She is Director of the Center for Information Development Management, a membership organization focused on content management and information development best practices. Joanne and colleagues are called upon by corporate executives worldwide to consult on strategies for content management, development and organizational management, product interface design, customer studies, web and traditional information architecture, and tools and technology selection. For more than 33 years, Joanne has addressed audiences internationally on subjects ranging from content management, project management, effective interfaces and information, minimal information products, usability testing, and online and web-based information, to managing the information design and development process. Her workshops are dedicated to enhancing the practices and products that will best promote customer satisfaction. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. We are thrilled that Joanne is here to share her experiences with us today. Now I will turn the presentation over to Dr. Joanne Hackos from Comtech Services. Joanne?
Thank you, Hannah. It's great to be here today. And we're ready to really talk about all of the issues that we want to address in making sure that organizations who are crossing the chasm are able to use the DITA information development model effectively. Let's see, I think I have slides here, right? As Hannah said, my company, Comtech Services, is involved in enterprise content management in a whole variety of ways and for many, many years. As many of you I know already know, since I already know many of you and have worked with you, we really do stress helping companies find ways to be more productive and efficient in their processes, and then also be more effective in providing information to their customers. DCL and I combined our client list just for this presentation. As you can see, we really work with a whole great variety of people who come from all kinds of industries. It's always very exciting to see new organizations deciding that they need to find better, more efficient, and more effective ways of developing content and presenting that content to their customers. So that's really going to be our theme today. Please do let me know if you're hearing this okay. You can always add notes to the question box. And I think, Hannah, you've got somebody who can't find the right phone number.
Yes, I'm right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go on. Let's talk today about DITA adoption, and we're going to talk about this in two ways. First of all, I want to talk about this issue of crossing the chasm and the concept of crossing the chasm. And then we're going to move into the processes we think are the best starting point for new organizations who are really examining this for the first time. So we've got two halves to this presentation. And I hope that you'll see that, where you fit in, especially if you're members of this large group that we call the early majority adopters of a new technology. And I noticed from the survey questions that you responded to in registration that a very high percentage of you, about 75%, represent organizations that are just getting started. And I'm going to argue quite strongly that DITA has is moving or has moved across the chasm. Crossing the Chasm refers to Geoffrey Moore's book, published in 2000, in which he outlined the processes that products go through or technology goes through as part of the adoption life cycle. You know, what happens from the very early introduction of a new technology to its history over time. And I think we're going to see that this model of crossing the chasm, and you see that illustrated here, is really working out in a very significant way in terms of the adoption of the OASIS DITA standard for information development, especially technical information development, although not exclusively, as we're learning, as we find more and more early majority customers taking up this challenge. So when we look at DITA adoption, moving across the chasm from the innovators and early adopters, I'll go back one, this big gap that you see here in the model, it says that things really change. And if we look at what really changes, is that early majority adopters, unlike innovators and early adopters themselves, have new requirements, present new challenges to the people responsible for the technology, want to put new processes in place, and really require new approaches to adoption. And I think we're in the DITA developers and the technical committee at OASIS, we're really seeing this kind of shift occurring. And it's clear that what worked for innovators and early adopters is not going to work for the more conservative, the more challenging members of the early majority community. So we've really got to start taking a different direction from our lessons learned. And that's really what we're going to focus on today. If I can get the next slide to come up. Oh boy. Oh, now lots of them are coming, of course. Okay, now I think we're working again. There we go. The first group that I really want to talk about and to reference are the DITA Innovators. And you can see from Geoffrey Moore's analysis, this represents a very important group of people, but a very small one. And innovators are, of course, the people who adopt new technologies as soon as it appears. You know, even before it appears, if you look at the record, the innovators look at something as an opportunity to promote business value, to get ahead of the competition, to see through the promise of something that really looks effective. As a result of the interest, you know, and I can see this as an innovator myself with the DITA technology, innovators are willing to accept things that don't work all that well. They accept usability problems. They might accept design problems. And these are things we've seen since the introduction of DITA in 2005. They're also happy to accept early failures as a promise that there will be later successes as things become better understood and you know, presented in a better way. And this is certainly the pattern that we've seen with DITA adoption. So if we look at just who the innovators are and what were they doing, you know, we see certainly IBM as the original developer of the DITA specification. IBM began working on this as a replacement for an older technology that they had in place, and one that would also lead them away from the traditional book publication to a topic-based architecture. So certainly IBM was one of the DITA innovators. We also find, if you look at the list, that members of the founding OASIS DITA Technical Committee, like myself, have been active in innovating and starting out very early. We were developing DITA solutions and working through the issues before the publication of the first specification. And then, of course, there's always a few crazy people who welcome the challenge and are willing to put up with things they don't always understand and also don't always work. And we certainly found, lots of those challenges with the original DITA standard. So the innovators kind of paved the way. And if you work for a company producing a new product, you're certainly going to see the influence of the innovators in your company's market. Okay, wait, I'm hearing some background noise. If somebody can go on to mute, please. Okay, that's a little better. The second group that we want to address, and you can see from the slide that represents about 13.5%. So if we combine those two together, we've probably got around 16% of DITA adoption. The DITA early adopters. Now, as my quote says, these are respectable people, often opinion leaders. They're willing to try out new ideas, but always in a careful way. And the early adopters were really companies that saw the potential, saw that it would produce a good return on investment, even though they might have somewhat of a tough time, working in a completely undefined environment. But they're really willing to try out the new ideas, get their, dip their toe in the water, get going and try this out. So who are the early adopters? And I know some of you on this call are members of the early adopters. I've seen, reviewed some of the names and companies that I recognize. Key companies that were willing to try things out, often, as we found, with the guidance of the innovators. Now, what motivated these early adopters? First on the list, of course, were the costs of localization and translation. In 2005, 2006, when DITA was first released, we were beginning to see this huge uptick in the number of languages that companies were translating their information into. We were seeing new requirements in the EU community, so translation costs were becoming a really big item. And the fact that we could handle that effectively at the topic level and reduce translation costs through content reuse was really attractive. One of the other big issues was the increasing cost of operations. Managers were looking at their companies and their writing teams and saying, gee, we're spending a lot of time on multiple tools and getting our output out and PDFs and help systems and HTML and all the other new requirements. Isn't there a way to automate that process? Isn't there a way to get out of this busy work that takes us away from content creation? And then, of course, one of the central problems that DITA helps to solve, as well as many other previous reuse strategies, and that was the boring but necessary job of updating the same content every place it occurs. When I first saw content management systems, component content management system back in 1990, one of the things that as a manager of documentation professionals attracted me was we could stop tracking changes on Excel spreadsheets because we could change it once and it would change everywhere. So these were the motivations, and I think they continue to be motivations for those of you that are, just starting out, really just starting out. The early adopters included some of the companies that you might be familiar with, and some of you might even be on the call. One of the early adopters that we managed along was ITT Fluid Technology, now renamed Xylem, the global developer of industrial and commercial pumps, and really had this translation cost escalating really quickly and needed to do something about it. One of our DITA original team members, Chris Kravogel, worked with Kone elevators and escalators as we did Same issues, lots and lots of equipment that was very, very similar. Ceridian BCT, an early adopter, an organization that makes medical devices. Nokia Networks and Avaya Networks. Again, telecommunications industry, early adopters, because of the challenge of putting out so many versions of very similar information, and also the volume of information that meant that automated publishing would become really attractive. So who are the early adopters then? These are people who are innovative, although they may not be the very first to try things out. They're going to wait for the innovators to sort of lead the way. But they have a vision that includes cost savings and improved efficiencies. And they also trust that there have emerged into the environment innovators who can guide the adoption process. And I think that's what we're going to see in the second half of this presentation. A really important way of thinking about it. Okay, again, my slides are going to be a little slow here. So how do innovators and early adopters work together? Innovators learned how to make the DITA standard work. The innovators also worked closely with the product vendors, people developing authoring tools, and people developing content management systems to support DITA in their products. And that also took a technology development life cycle where people were really quite concerned at first and said, are we sure this is going anywhere? And then the innovators led the work of the early adopters in many cases. Early adopters, as I've said, are willing to take a chance on an unproven technology, trust the innovators to help establish best practices, and have been willing to communicate through conferences, webinars, and presentations the lessons they've learned to this larger community. Because it's going to be those early adopters in your industry and doing the same things you are doing who you'll trust as the people who have the right advice for you. So here we are again. We're moving across the chasm. Innovators and early adopters have been there. They've been in the DITA environment now, some of them for as much as 6 and 7 years. Now we're seeing a change, and we've been seeing this change probably through most of 2011. And certainly it's continuing as a trend in the early month of 2012. And that is the move across the chasm. Well, how's this being supported? We've got vendors who are doing excellent jobs of supporting the DITA standard, of making the DITA standard easier to use within their tools environment. We're also seeing the emergence of product development activities creating lightweight editors or simple implementations for authors who are not professional writers, who are not information developers, and who don't want to learn the underlying structures, but do want to create copy that's reusable. And that's going to allow, I think, this early majority market for DITA adoption to really grow significantly. So we're moving DITA across the chasm. And here's my picture of building that chasm. It's probably got mostly Lego blocks at the moment. Innovators and early adopters with experience are making DITA work, right? Building the bridge and developing a roadmap that really works for DITA adoption. And I think what the takeaway, the lesson learned in here is that the roadmap, the DITA timeline that we're going to talk about today works, and it's the product of a lot of hard work and some experimentation in the innovator and early adoption stages. It's exactly the kind of thing that you're going to see if you're supporting products yourself. It's when the people who would prefer to talk to the developers than read your documentation are no longer the dominant customer, but your early majority customers begin to emerge, and they're asking for a better experience. They're asking for usability. They're asking for better information. And they want information that solves their problems, not information that tells them to go read, 100 pages to understand, an underlying concept before they have it, can get something to work. Who are the early majority? These are the people we're talking about. And as my note says here, thoughtful people, careful, but accepting change, accepting change more quickly than the average, right? Because we're still on this first half, right? We've got 16% and 34%. That's going to be our 50% mark, right? Late majorities later. But we are the 34%, the early majority. Early majority members are waiting for DITA standard to be tested and safe, waiting for references from mainstream organizations that they know of, that are in their industry, and that they trust. But they're also wondering about the cost and asking about, is this going to work, and how hard is it going to be, and how disruptive might it be? They need tools that are going to be easy to use. It's a really significant change, right? And in the last year, ever since the release of some of the changes in DITA 1.2, we've been hearing from the early majority members, it's just too complicated. Can you make this simpler? And the members of the technical committee, the innovators like our organization at Comtech, have been taking this seriously and really finding ways to make the experience of the early majority a much more settled and understood and effective. So we're building this roadmap, a roadmap to DITA, because we want to support early majority, more conservative, more waiting for things to go well. We want to support them on the road to success. So in today's presentation, we're just going to talk about the first stages. In subsequent sessions of this webinar, we will talk about the second and third phases of the roadmap. But I'll explain them all today and give you a sort of a prefiguring of what those later phases in the last two second and third sessions are going to cover. So now you're in the exploration stage, and I hope some of you are there and this is making sense to you already. Here are the questions that we hear all the time. I'm almost quoting verbatim from comments in the last week that have come to the DITA Yahoo user group. And remember that somebody coming to the DITA Yahoo user group is already, a little bit more into the technology. But the same comments or questions are coming up every time. Are we too small for DITA? Is it only for big companies? Is it only for the Fortune 500? Well, definitely not. We've certainly, from the innovator stage, we've seen companies of one or groups of one implementing DITA. Are companies like ours using this? Is somebody else in my industry that I can talk to? Is there somebody who has been through this experience before and has the same kind of group we have or the same size? And I am forever putting people, one of my major roles, putting people in touch with other people. Say, somebody will write me and say, who else is doing this that's like us? I'll say, well, here are the people you should talk to. And we, link them together, right? We also do it, of course, through the LinkedIn facilities. Is this going to be too expensive? Where are the costs going to be? I'm being asked to come up by tomorrow with some numbers for my management who wants to know, what ballpark are we in? And people in the exploration stage are asking for that information. Is this an investment of $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million in multiples of 10? Or is it something in between? And is there a less expensive way to get started and then make a larger investment once we've kind of proved the case? are we going to have to rewrite everything? You know, does it mean that nothing we've done before in all of our legacy is really going to work? How much? It's really a question of how much work is it going to be? Or what if we have to go back to our writers and say, you know, you're going to have to change the way you do things. If you have, you know, you're a manager in that kind of a community, you may have people who push back by saying, well, we've always been doing a good job. We won awards for doing this work. Why are you telling us that we have to change how we do things? Is that going to happen? Is it really going to solve our problems, or is it going to end up causing more problems than we have now? You know, are we going to be able to get on the right curve of decreasing our internal costs after an initial investment? Or are we going to find that, you know, 3 years from now, it's still costing us more than it would have had we stayed with our known technologies? And where do we go for help? How do we get help? You know, what are the things that are really going to make sense for us? Okay, so we've got a lot of questions. I hope these are the kinds of questions that many of you are asking. Well, where do you go to explore? What's our advice? You know, if you're in this exploration phase, what do you need to do? Well, you could attend a webinar like this one or the 2 upcoming ones and say, okay, I can get an idea of what people are doing. You can find out if there's a local DITA user group in your community and attend a meeting. You know, find a place to meet other people who are, you know, addressing the same kinds of problems or can give you some answers to your questions. Buy a book. You know, there certainly is my book. The 2nd edition came out in August this past year of Introduction to DITA, and that's a tutorial. It's a series of lessons, step by step, and it can take you from the very first steps of creating topics all the way through publishing. And if you look at the selection of books, there are 5 or 6 books now on about getting started with DITA. You can read an article or read several articles, and the place I recommend going is this website, dita.xml.org. That's the official website that is maintained by the OASIS DITA Adoption Technical Committee, a committee that I chair. And we have official publications called best practices publications, and then there are lots of material that have been added by the community to this site. So that's a good starting point, a good place to begin your exploration. So early phase, early thinking, what is this about? Can we do this? Is this going to make sense? So we have a question to ask you right now. And Vincent's going to run the poll, and we're asking you, are you DITA adopters? So please take a minute to answer my poll. Are you innovators? Are you early adopters? Are you early majority? Or no, you're not any of these yet? Okay, Vincent, I think we've got about 85%. And can we show the results? Well, this is really interesting. Actually, it kind of goes along with what you reported on the registrations. We've got some early adopters. We've got a few innovators here. Hi, folks. We probably all know each other. We've got some early adopters, about 27% in all. But look at the numbers, right? We've got 25% in the early majority group, exactly who we're addressing, and almost half of you who don't even know yet if you're in the early majority. Okay, so maybe we'll convince you today that this is the place you would like to be. Okay, next slide. There you go. So, whoops, these clicked by faster than I thought. Now, you've gone through exploration. You've been trying to get the answers to the questions, so you're ready to move to the next stage. And that is what we're calling the preparation stage. And really the key here in preparing, you're still asking questions, you're still trying to understand if you've got a good return on investment, but the key is to begin building a business case. Kind of look around, see what the situation is, see where the pain points are in your organization. We've been exploring that in one organization in the last few weeks. We've been looking for places where it's extraordinarily awkward and time-consuming to update 10, 15, 20 versions of the same content with small differences among them, or where translation costs are really going up significantly, or where it's information that's out there is not consistent. We're not presenting a consistent face to the customers. So let's see what this means. As you prepare your business case, what are the questions you're asking? We need to get out of the formatting business. It's taking too much time. In a study we did this past year of a service organization employing senior engineers to answer questions from customers and to support the field service staff. We found that they were creating content using Microsoft Word in a fairly complex template. And as we interviewed these very high-paid senior engineers, we found out that many of them were reporting to us that they spent at least half their time trying to get Microsoft Word to format correctly. A huge time sink, a huge cost sink of very high-paid people. And even when they got finished with trying to get this to work out in a new procedure they wanted to write up, they had a staff of editors, of 3 editors, who also said to us, we don't do any editing. We spend all of our time trying to fix whatever they did to the original Word files to make them publish effectively. Well, they're now on their way. They're moving into DITA, and they're in their pilot project, and they're getting out of the formatting business. Lots of companies, of course, are saying translations are getting too expensive. And we know from some of our early adopters that when they looked in all the hidden places where translations were being paid for by various divisions of the company, it added up to enormous amounts of money. Company senior management wasn't even aware of just how high the translation bills had become. And we said, we can reduce that. This is the best return on investment, is to reduce those translation costs, and we can do it within the first pilot project and show that that's working. We find the content is duplicated, right? Or almost duplicated, or that it's redundant, and we've said the same thing 5 times. And in my minimalism classes, in my structured authoring classes, this is the result so many people see when they start to analyze. Well, wait a minute, didn't we already say that? Or we have to say it in all these places, but guess what? It's not consistent because we've forgotten to update it in some places. Just yesterday, we were analyzing a group of files that are all supposed to be the same, and one of them has a spelling mistake, right? Somebody left out a word or has a grammar mistake, and it's just because they were all updated individually. We've had people say our customers are changing. They don't want the delivery of giant PDFs anymore. They're asking for quick answers to their questions. They want to go to our search or to Google search or to Bing search and get a topic. Get one topic. Even if they're using PDFs because it's the only thing we provide, what we're finding out is they're just taking the one topic out of that download and getting the information that they need. Our business model is changing. We've seen companies saying just this past week that when the company was producing, a bunch of individual products, not much reuse potential. Now they've just been told that there's going to be 8 new versions of flavors meeting customer needs of an existing product. So can we get some help? Who can help? How are we going to do this? Where do we look for assistance? These are the kinds of things that we're trying to do with our early majority thinkers. So here's another poll question for you. We want to know this. I'm interested in finding out how many of you have prepared a business case. This is just a quick yes and no. Okay, we've got about 85% again. Let's show the results. There we go. Wow. Well, a higher percentage of you than I thought is working on or has prepared a business case. But the majority, is waiting to see, what do we have to find out? Well, maybe we can answer that question with the next slide. What do you need to make a business case winnable? Okay, here, let me see if I can get to the next one, right? Whoops. Okay, first of all, you got to know what things cost today. Your current costs and your predicted curve into the future. Let's say that, a good DITA implementation is going to take a couple of years to get settled in with lots of content. So you want to predict out. You want that curve going upward that says, here's what it's costing us today. Here's what it's going to cost 2 years from now if we do nothing, if we don't change anything. And then you want to look at a predicted cost savings, in a conservative predicted cost savings, if you change the way you work. If you automate your publishing, if you reduce your translation costs, if you reuse content and therefore create fewer redundant topics. The other important part of a business case is that you identify and have on your team a high-level corporate champion. We find that when that is occurring, it's a tremendous selling point, somebody who knows how to talk to the C-level management, right? You need references to other early majority organizations in your line of business. And, those are the things that you can learn from conferences and user groups and, articles like the articles we publish in e-news and best practices. And then you're going to have to look at the external side of this equation. And that is, what are our customers telling us today? Are they satisfied? Are they happy? Are they loyal to our company because we have great information? Or are they complaining? Are they telling us they can't find things? Are they telling us that we have things to do to improve? So these are some of the issues I think are really important to getting that business case to work. Another poll question. Does your business analysis now include your costs before and after DITA? Information development costs before and after DITA. Another quick yes and no. Well, I can already see how this one's trending. Give you another minute, half a minute. Okay, Vincent, I think we've got our results. Let's show those results. Well, this is interesting that 68% of you, 2/3, say, no, you don't have your cost analysis. And yet, that's the strongest piece of your business case. What is it costing us today? What's our backlog? What are we not getting done that management wants us to do? If we change our processes, if we make an investment in structured authoring and new technology, is that going to make a difference? Can we predict a cost change over time? We've published a lot of articles that show how organizations have made this change, and you can check out at the infomanagementcenter.com, the CIDM website, infomanagementcenter.com, for some of those articles which are available there. Okay, back to the slides. Okay, let's go on. And I'm having another problem with slides again. There we go. One of the things we want to mention to you in connection with business case is one of DCL's products called Harmonizer. And I think what you want to remember here is that one of the jobs in building your business case is to show the pain points. Where are their problems? And this issue of duplicate content or near duplicate content or redundant content is sometimes with a very large legacy body of information. It's really hard to figure out. We sometimes hear groups say, well, we don't have any reuse opportunities. And then when you look at their content, clearly there are lots of reuse opportunities. They just haven't had a chance, haven't been able to figure it out. This happens especially in organizations where content has been building from different authors over many, many years. Almost no single person knows what's out there. DCL provides help with Harmonizer on doing that. It can take your files and identify exact matches and close matches and things like errors and help you create a metric on the reuse potential of your documentation set. So there's the website. Take a look at what this is, because I think it can be a tremendous aid, first of all, to find out what the problem is, to identify it in really firm statistical terms, and then also have a way of cleaning up things before you get started. Less cleanup is always a tremendous advantage as you move your legacy content into a new form. Now, we've talked about exploration and we've talked about the preparation of examining the business case. Now we want to move into the last item we're going to talk about today, of the 8 that we'll talk about overall, and that is education. You've gotten good answers to your questions. You think you've got your pain points identified. You're beginning to collect information on what it's costing you now and how you could reduce those costs and increase productivity. But you're ready to go on. Well, what's the thing to do next? I want to talk about the wrong path first, because I see this frequently as people really struggle. They say, well, DITA's open source and I can go download the DITA Open Toolkit. And that's what they do, and they open it up, or they buy some software or download some trial versions of an editor that has the DITA Open Toolkit included. And they try to do something. Try to figure out what it does. Try to figure out what all these parts are. Or they look at the DITA language reference and find out there's, 2,000 tags. And they're just overwhelmed. I can never learn this. Or they go in and with great confidence say, okay, I've created these topics. I've actually got a map of those sample topics. And now I'm going to output to PDF. And they output the PDF and they say it looks terrible. We had somebody recently who said, the index isn't any good. The index doesn't look like I want it to look, and doesn't look like our indexes. So and then decided that she needed another editor that produced a better index. Well, the real problem was just that the style sheet, the standard style sheet that is developed by some volunteers who, try to make things look presentable, is never going to look like the one that you really want. And people get really confused, and they figure it's too hard and I can't do it. The other thing they do is just convert everything. Somebody said to them, well, on the DITA, the road to DITA maturity, the first thing you do is just convert all your legacy content. Just get it all in there. I remember working with one of the big banking credit card firms. I'm sure you'd know they have a bunch of Vikings working for them. And their major goal when they put in place their first document management system was to measure how much content was in it. Well, people found lots of things to put in, but nothing that they worried about or cared about. But so they were just measuring volume. Well, measuring volume doesn't get you many places. So what do we recommend instead? Take a workshop. I generally recommend people start with minimalism. Find out how to really analyze what your customers need from you and how to structure that information effectively. Structured authoring. Coming up with a design for your team. DITA basics, learning about tasks, concepts, reference topics, maps, publishing. Come to a conference. Meet the innovators and early adopters. They're the ones who are on the program. Hear from other early majority newbies who were there attending as well as you. Then have your content analyzed by pros, people who can look at it and say, here's the potential. These are the kinds of things that you will be able to do with your content. Okay, so here's my question, right? Another quick one. Yes or no? Have you taken a DITA workshop already? And I'm asking this in 3 ways, either no, yes or no, but have you taken an instructor-led class or have you taken an online workshop? Okay, Vince, I think we've got our vote. Trend is really interesting. And we can show those results. We have 34% of you, or at plus 17, which is 51%, have done, either taken an instructor-led class or done something online. But another 49%, no. Now, if you're heading toward this is a solution, I think that should be on your radar. We'll talk about some workshops at the very end and tell you what's available. Okay, let me see if I can get this advanced again. There we go. Oops. 1 click becomes 2 clicks. Okay, so roadmap to DITA. I thought I'd end today with this timeline, and I'm going to expand upon it just a little bit. This is a timeline that we've developed, and I've got somewhat standardized dates on here, but any of that would be, you would need to customize for your own organization. But you notice there's a planning phase. This one's probably a little shorter than some of you need, especially if you're still exploring and preparing and needing a business case. Your planning may be pushed out a little bit more. But once planning is ready and you're ready to go, there's a kickoff, right? And that kickoff includes 3 or 4 major pieces. The first one is information modeling. That's where you look at your requirements, your kind of information, and begin to create the rules around it for how your authors are going to use all those elements, or part of them, or a few of them, that DITA offers. Most people, we find, use only a fraction. And that's one of the decision points that gets established through an information architecture team in the information modeling stage. You notice there's a space for DITA training in there, because part of this first phase, kickoff, is really to get the information architecture team trained in DITA basics. We've got a conversion piece in there that says, can we begin to convert some content, get some help through technology, and then begin to restructure that content. And groups decide, right? Sometimes restructuring comes before conversion, sometimes afterwards. You'll notice also that style sheets begin in here someplace, and that is really making the output customized to your organization. Following information modeling, or maybe with some overlap right in here, begins a pilot project. And then pilot project followed by an analysis of how well we did. So let me go now into some of these pieces in a little bit more detail, right? Planning phase, you're building your business case, evaluating your current costs, and demonstrating how reuse and structured authoring and automated publishing and more automated translation will help reduce costs. You start to investigate minimalism, because one of the really important decisions is, do we really need all this content to be moved over? You may find that your customers have changed in the last few years especially, and they're looking for something new, and not all that legacy content is relevant. Are you creating a targeted information model for your team? Your information architecture team members, whoever you designate for that job, get together and say, this is what we're going to do with DITA in our organization. And it's almost always a simplification. Are we going to harmonize so we can evaluate our legacy content for reuse and cleanup opportunities? Then can we convert existing content as needed? In some organizations, groups we've worked with, conversion goes pretty well, because they start out with good structure. And it's, they have to sort of demarcate where task ends and starts and ends, or what a concept is. But they can convert a lot of content pretty well. Others have more to do with reshaping current content so that it is information typed and it is structured, and it really does take on these new characteristics. Specify your publishing requirements so that you can develop style sheets that support PDF and XHTML and help and other output types, especially as we're moving toward web delivery that delivers individual topics on demand, dynamic publishing, fulfilling dynamic publishing requirements. And then if you need help in developing that publishing pipeline, getting trained, getting started, consider an expert in this DITA Open Toolkit and style sheet development that can really move you along really quickly. So there's my DITA roadmap. Whoops. Learn from the innovators, right? Focus. Now here's what we're going to talk about at the next webinar in February. Focus on a small but important pilot project. The pilot project will help you refine your model. You never will have made all the decisions you need to make at that point. You'll develop an authoring guide, concentrate on your structured authoring, help everybody learn the templates and the tags, develop your localization and publishing pipelines. Then, at the end of all of that pilot, measure your success. How did you do? Obviously your pilot project is going to cost something. You've got people working on new stuff. You may be getting new tools at that point. Generally, you're getting an editor, if not a full content management system. So there's money being spent. But in comparison to what it was taking you to manage that content in the old way, and the first glimpse on the horizon of managing content in the new way, are you seeing it changing? Are you seeing a return on investment? In one of our projects, in the first 6 months, we had an $8 million return on investment through translation. That's an amazing number. Consider the need to purchase a component content management system. Please note that I'm stressing component content management. Not all content management systems are the same, and not all of them will support DITA. One that enables you to use the DITA functionality effectively, correctly, and take full advantage of the potential of XML content publishing and localization requirements. Recognize that you don't have to have a content management system to work with DITA. You can start out in your file system. You can use a basic version control system, but eventually when you have thousands of topics, you'll find that the content management system will become essential to your ongoing success. So lots of things to think about. We'll talk about these in some detail next time. One more poll question. Are you ready to move to the next phase of development for your organization? And I think I've just got a yes or no. Is this helping? Does it give you some confidence? Well, this is looking very good. Early returns suggest, as we're all getting election results for the last, what, month and a half? Okay, I think we got our vote, Vincent. We've got a great majority who feel, now 78% say, yeah, we're ready to move, and that's great. I'm hoping this has helped convince you that this is a good idea. Okay, and I think we've only got a couple more slides, probably just ending points. And I get stuck here again. Vincent, if you can advance that one, please do. There we go. And there's the bird clock going off in the background. ComTech and DCL can help. We have a wonderful brochure online. This is a little bit of that brochure. You can download it and print it for yourself. But it's got all my cartoon characters, and it's got a really nice explanation of all of these phases. But these are the kinds of things that are available to you, and they can help move you to that next stage. And at the end of this, we're just going to list some of the upcoming events. You'll find these on our website at comtech-serve.com under workshops. Advanced DITA training coming up actually at the DCL headquarters in New York, right next to the LaGuardia Airport. Agile information development, a couple of minimism classes, including in Germany, in Frankfurt, and then information modeling workshop coming up in North Carolina. And conferences, our content management strategies DITA North America is in April. The program, I think, just went up today. Please take a look and see what you think. And we have, of course, Crossing the Chasm Part 2 and 3 coming up in this part of this series. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I think, Hannah, we have some questions.
Yes. Early on, David asked, why did the early adopters reject solutions like DocBook?
Good question. I think, DocBook's been around for quite some time, and lots of early adopters in XML, and a lot of companies that did not, still have not pursued the DITA standard, were DocBook adopters. And the thing I think that's really, there's two things really significantly different between DocBook and DITA. One is that DocBook is organized as a book. You're definitely creating books and chapters and sections and subsections. Now, DITA has book maps and allows you to do the same things. But, the environment's a little bit different. Now, Norm Walsh, the developer and advocate for DocBook, has shown that DocBook can be organized to support topics as well. But when you go in and create your flavor of DocBook, you get a completely new program that you have to continue to maintain. DITA from the very beginning, from the first spec, came with the concept of specialization built in. Specialization means that you can modify the DITA standard to meet some of your special needs without creating something entirely new. So that a new version comes along of the DITA standard, your specializations will still work. And that's a really compelling difference. Where in DocBook, you're doing your own thing, even though it's derived from DocBook. With DITA, you stay in the community and you remain interoperable. You remain capable of sharing content with other DITA users. In the time of mergers and acquisitions and splits, as we've just gone through, that's a really important feature.
Great. Norbert wants to know if he can get a version of the second edition of the DITA book that you mentioned earlier in Germany.
It is available on the Amazon site, at least the U.S. one. Amazon is selling it. We don't have the Kindle. We're almost have the Kindle version ready, and we also sell it on our website. So you can go to the Comtech website and order a copy there.
Okay, Lucy wants to know, where would you fit in the research needed to determine software or hardware requirements and implementation?
My preference, if you think about that timeline, and Vincent, can you find the timeline for us again and show that on the slide? There you go. I feel the best time to really look at your software and hardware requirements, and it's mostly software. I mean, you certainly might need a new server or something to support your group. But when you have your information modeling underway, you've gotten some part of your team trained, you have an idea of what you want to do with styles, you're starting into that pilot project, that's when you're really gelling on what you want this software to be able to do. What we hope people will do as they're working through the information model and early pilot is to start creating use cases, scenarios of how they want things to behave. It's one of the very best ways to develop a requirements document, is to say our authors need to do this, or our environment requires this. We need to be able to complete individual topics and send them for translation as soon as they've been approved. We don't have the time to wait for an entire book to be finished before we do that. Well, if that's the case, if that's your scenario, then you go out looking for a content management system, a component content management system that can do that, that can help you do that effectively. So requirements should come out of knowing what you need to be able to do, and it's hard to tell that until you've gotten started. When Research in Motion did their first project, the very first thing we did was minimalism training, and they spent a year, refiguring content to go with a minimalist approach. During that year, as they were working on content, they were writing their requirements. And it used to be that there was a set of their requirements that was in, you could find at dita.xml.org. I believe it's still there, and you might go out and look for it. The Research in Motion actual requirements for their software selection. But it came, in this after this early stage was complete. Okay. Hopefully that helps.
Joanne, do you think we have time for one more question? Or are we all out? Okay. Eileen says, I've read your new 1.2 book, and I'm struck by your new elements and attributes in this spec. Very few tools seem to support 1.2. What's your opinion on waiting on the right tool versus moving ahead with tools that we have now?
Very good question. We're finding, especially in the authoring environment, that almost every one of the main products, ArborText, XMetal, will be bringing out their 1.2 versions within the next month or two. So things are changing really rapidly. A tool like Oxygen already has that in place. I'm hearing the same things from the content management system vendors. So I think this is the time to get started. The tools, if they're not caught up, are just on the verge of catching up. Not everybody's supporting everything in 1.2, but more and more is on the horizon. And if you say to a vendor, I'm not going to buy this until we can use the constraints mechanism, that's going to be an incentive. They're all telling me, we're waiting for the customers to tell us they want this to work for them. So you've got to get behind that and push the vendors to say, wait a minute, we're learning about this new stuff. It was in Joanne's book. When are you going to do it? That's what gets it there.
Well, it looks like we're out of time for questions, but as I said earlier, this webinar is being recorded and it's going to be made available to everyone later today. We want to thank everyone for joining us for Crossing the Chasm with DITA Part 1, Get Ready, Get Set, and we hope that you all enjoyed the webinar. For those of you who submitted a question in the question box, we will post the answers with the webinar recording. If you have any additional questions, please email Joanne at joanne.hackos@comtechserve.com, which is on the screen right now. We hope to see you all for the Part 2 Now Grow and the Part 3 Next Grow sessions taking place on February 23rd and March 22nd. Joanne, do you want to say bye?
Oh, yes. Thank you all for attending. It's been a pleasure talking about this topic, one of my favorites. Thank you very much, Hannah and Vincent and Linda. Bye-bye.
Bye.